Catherine, thanks for doing this.
It's my pleasure.
I'm doing this as a volunteer for the group, the consortium that's behind this project. And the way it works is that we're asking each candidate the same 6 questions. And the first question is this. All 8 of our municipal governments have committed to the Transform Waterloo Region strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050, with a 50% reduction by 2030. How will you, as a local representative, help our communities and businesses achieve this goal?
Great question, Martin. Thank you very much. I just want to say thanks to the organizers for doing this. Our children, our grandchildren deserve hope and a chance for a livable future. And from clean air to water to sustainable urban densities, I just want to say I'm very proud to be part of this election because we put forward the Green New Democratic Deal. And we have launched this as a priority prior to the pandemic because we recognize the urgency and the opportunity. And the opportunity is the key part. And I do think, to your question, that municipal partners are looking for a true partner at the provincial government, and they haven't had that for quite some time. And certainly they're not looking for one that overrides their public consultation process and planning diligence. And, here in Waterloo Region, people, the citizens have, voiced their concerns around environmental and planning practices, and our local governments have had to listen. And that's the power of democracy. So that public feedback is so important. And so we have focused in our platform around collaboration, around reducing barriers and providing funding to municipalities. One of the key parts of our platform is uploading 50% of the public transit operational costs, which will provide some much needed relief locally to pursue those local projects like cycling infrastructure, like community gardens, just as small examples. I think that for us, the relationship with municipalities is key, as is industry, including Stewardship Ontario. And so we will improve and expand the producer responsibility model of waste diversion to include more sectors and set higher recycling targets, plus promoting an economy of repairable goods. And I believe we're one of the only parties that is focusing on that cycle of around repairable goods and what the potential of it can be. So this is the main thrust and the main answer to your question is that we want to work with municipalities, and because we ultimately believe that municipalities, know their communities best. We don't want to interfere, but we want to find some common threads, be it public transit, be it on planning, and the potential is there. So I think that the local 8 municipal councils that we have would, welcome that change and that respect, and it really will be a culture shift for a provincial government going forward.
How will your party meet the target, the target of protecting 30% of Ontario's lands and waters by 2030, and this be in keeping with Canada's international commitments?
Yeah, very good question. I do think also that the relationship between the provincial government and the federal government, those two levels should also be holding each other to account, because that's the way that we're actually going to reach those targets of protection of 30% of Ontario's lands and waters by 2030. Our Green New Democratic Deal will mandate, for instance, just one of the things, that all newly built public, residential, and commercial buildings be net zero emissions by 2030, in addition to a very ambitious building retrofit program that will generate $15.2 billion of annual economic activity and create 100,000 jobs. And I have to say, this component of our platform really is informed by organizations like Reep. You know, they've done a very good job of educating me as a public servant over the years, and I see the potential. We just need the political will to make it happen. In particular, that home retrofit program will provide grants between $7,000 and $11,000 for homeowners because we honestly believe that the smart money is on conservation. And that's the lesson that I've learned from local advocates in Waterloo Region. In addition to that, the zero emissions vehicle strategy, we have missed an important window these last 4 years, but ramping up electric vehicle sales to hit 100% by 2035. And this will be accompanied by a $600 grant for every home to install the electric vehicle charging stations at home. Also a job creator. We will be introducing a new cap and trade program around for the province of Ontario, because as you know, this government has moved away from that, and the electrification of all municipal transit by 2040. There is no reason that we should be running diesel along the KW GO train corridor. In fact, it's fairly embarrassing. So this question actually comes back to planning and you know, really emboldening and being, you know, future driven, if you will, on how we should plan for our communities. But you have to get the core principles right around reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and then looking at where those greenhouse gas emissions are really the highest. On the waterfront, I've been a longtime advocate for clean drinking water and protecting, for instance, here in Waterloo Region, our aquifer. That's now 18 years of advocacy. Provincially, though, in our platform, we will launch an inter-ministerial provincial water strategy to guarantee public access to sustainable water sources. In addition to that, we need a transparent public review of the permit to take water process, especially for single-use bottled water. In addition to these ideas, we have a firm commitment to plant 1 billion trees by 2030. We have to make up for a lot of lost time, quite honestly. This government's most, progressive plan, I guess, was to create a day to pick up litter. So we need to be aggressive and assertive in some of these ideas because there is a sense of urgency.
What will you do to address the need for mixed multi-use housing and walkable communities, and that new home construction is done sustainably and affordably?
Very good question. I mean, this comes back to that relationship with the municipalities, and I don't know if you followed some of the tension that happened, but the provincial government, has some very good ideas on the books. They just haven't applied them. We are firm believers in the intensification of housing, including duplexes and multiplexes. We also are going to be one of the only parties that builds housing with rent geared to income, because we need a variety of housing in our cores, in our communities. I think that on the transportation side, that we have to plan for communities to be less dependent on cars, and that includes, obviously active transportation. So we have made a commitment to fund public transit, prioritize public transit, create sustainable communities on a go-forward basis. But also cancel the costly and unnecessary Highway 413 and the Bradford bypass highways. These highways, for instance, were not costed in the budget. And if you want to look at the budget, it's actually 16 lanes of highway, maybe 17, and smog. This may have worked in the 1950s, but this is not a plan for the future. So we're committed to, projected $10 billion for Highway 413, that will go back into communities and back into housing that is in communities. So the idea around promoting sustainable smart growth that provides people with access to complete communities while reining in costly unsustainable sprawl is at the forefront of the planning process that we would be advocating for and supporting at the provincial level. And as I said, that includes intensification. And obviously ending the exclusionary zoning and focus on the missing middle homes, like as I mentioned, the duplexes and the triplexes, and transit within existing communities. I think I'm one of the only MPPs who takes the GO train to Toronto every once in a while, and that those options have to work for the people in order for you to get on that train. Nobody really wants to spend 4 hours in one of these massive highways. They'd like to be they'd like to have transit work for them. So it needs to be affordable, accessible, and flexible.
Okay, you've touched on this already, but how will you support sustainable transportation choices with less car dependency and better active transportation and public transit?
So what I've learned over the last 10 years is that, you know, municipalities, it's a very accountable and really at that local level, that relationship with community is very strong. There are many municipalities through AMO over the years who have presented plans around you know, interconnectivity between cities, interconnectivity between neighborhoods in their communities, and they're looking for a partner. That most relationships you know, just don't go one way. And so that is our plan around uploading that 50% of those operational costs, so that frees up room within local planning processes around transit to make transit more affordable, to expand it, to create more routes. You know, we do know that in some communities in Ontario, the poorest communities are left out of the transit options, and so that is unacceptable. The transit policies that we see going forward will be inclusive of everyone and very targeted as well.
Okay, how will your party protect farmland and address the negative ecological effects of aggregate extraction?
Yeah, well, this one's pretty close to home because, as you know, we've been fighting the expansion of aggregate extraction in our rural communities around Waterloo Region. And the government of the day and the government prior really refused to be proactive around determining, you know, who would get those permits and who wouldn't. And unfortunately, it became a bit of a free-for-all. So we're going to start by keeping track. I mean, because this is a big data collection on aggregate is a very big issue. And we want to restore the powers of the environmental commissioner as a start. As you know, Martin, this government ended that leadership role. But, you know, having the data, having those markers is very important. We are going to restore integrity to the land use planning process and revoke all MZOs that harm the public interest. And this is the key piece. We will repeal Schedule 6 of Bill 229, reversing the destructive changes to the Conservation Authorities Act and Planning Act, and confirm the role of authorities in integrated watershed management. We will expand the Greenbelt to include vital green spaces like Carruthers Creek headquarters as well. But on the land use, on that land use process, that planning process, the conservation authorities were really, well, undermined is one of the words. People at committee said that they had been overridden, including, of course, our Indigenous communities as well, the Indigenous communities in Ontario. So this needs, the repeal of Schedule 6 of Bill 229 needs to happen. The data needs to be there. There is no reason to expand aggregate permitting when there are so many permits out there right now that have not been put into play, quite honestly.
Okay, the last question is, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and women are disproportionately exposed to environmental hazards such as landfills and industrial pollution. How will you address this environmental injustice?
This is one that's really close to my heart. And if you look at the history of this province, you can see which communities have priority status and which ones do not. One of the ideas that has really come from our membership when we launched the Green New Democratic Deal was establishing Ontario's first youth climate corps. And this would be inclusive of BIPOC and Indigenous members and have obviously a good balance around the membership. We should be listening to these voices because, the decisions that haven't been made or have been made will impact the future of youth today and as the population ages. We also, Martin, have a commitment to clean up the mercury from the Wabagoon River once and for all, so that the Grassy Narrows community can begin to heal. We will fund a dedicated mercury treatment center. Finally, we will implement the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as per our NDP MPP Salma Makwa's Bill 76, which unfortunately was not put into place. What I want to say on this issue is that, our plan, the Green New Democratic Deal, which you can find quite easily, is based on the values of equity, affordability, reconciliation. Those are the key principles that we moved into this space on, and it's rooted in just and committed to a just transition. And this is actually an issue that comes up at the door because, people are concerned about losing their jobs, about things changing, they're risk averse. So what I like to say, and this comes directly from Andrea, is that any plan that we have around greening the economy, be it on the energy front, on the transit front, on the land use planning front, it has to be inclusive of the community members that will be directly affected. So that pipeline worker knows that he or she will be provided an opportunity to retrain in the new green economy, installing solar panels or EV installation or geothermal, for instance. And we feel that if we bring everybody along, then that transition will happen faster because the opposition will not be there. And I think that after these last 4 years, where we saw a government try to carve up the green belt and gutted Ontario's conservation authorities and rip down windmills and wind farms, and even going to court to really challenge this concept that climate change and the climate crisis is real. We need to have a huge reset. And for us, that is the Green New Democratic Deal. And I think that when people see this plan, they'll see themselves in it, which I think is an important part, and that we will get buy-in. We certainly will see a greater, more positive relationship with municipalities. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to address the climate crisis in a responsible manner that addresses longstanding issues that require an urgent action.
Catherine Fife, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much, Martin. Have a great day.